said that there was a side-by-side, these working in parallel. You have the fact-checking, and you have, what was the other system that you have in place? Sorry?
Community standards. Yes.
Community standards. So community standards would be the more general approach, right? This comes into the general terms of use of your platforms, while misinformation is more specific. Is that correct?
If I may, Mr. Chair. Okay, so the community standards, yes, you can look at them as they're not exactly the terms of service. That's a different legal term. But the community standards are the policies and the rules by which we moderate content on our platforms, right? They're the rules that say this is allowed on our platforms, this is not allowed on our platforms. The rules we have around misinformation are part of the community standards. I think the distinction I was trying to make with the Congresswoman earlier is that when it comes to misinformation, because we believe that it's really third parties that are the ones that are most capable and most appropriate to determine the veracity of information, there is a parallel system that we have in place, which is the third-party fact-checking system, right? And that system is in place, and those fact-checkers can proactively act even without any action on our part. They can act if we send them content that we want them to review from misinformation, but they can also act on their own if they think that there's a piece of misinformation that's going viral and could potentially cause harm. That's what I was trying to distinguish between. Whereas the other community standards violations, such as hate speech, incitement to violence, bullying and harassment, terrorism, child exploitative imagery, those community standards, those would be looked at by our content moderators, right? And who will make a determination about whether they violate the community standards or not, and therefore are removed or not. And I think Rob would like to add to that.
Your point, Mr. Chair, if I may, your point is very well taken in terms of how the internet works and virality, and we've all seen how that works. The upside to that is when we have a piece of content that's violating, I'd like to just underscore once again that feeds our ability to prevent its future proliferation. So just by way of example, for something that's a very non-controversial sort of content subset, so terrorism-related content and child exploitation-related content, every piece of video or every photograph that's uploaded to Instagram or to Facebook is compared against an enormous bank of hash values, digital fingerprints, if you like. So once we identify one of those and it's added to the bank, so to speak, it can no longer be spread on our platforms. And as members as the GIFCT, the Global Internet Forum to Counter Terrorism, we share those with our partners. We don't compete when it comes to safety, we collaborate. But to your point, yes, 6 hours is enough time for something to go viral. When you're operating at a scale that we are, a little bit south of 90 million users here in the Republic of the Philippines, just on Facebook, 6 hours we think is pretty good. We would love to get it down to 30 seconds. I don't know how realistic that is, but I do want to thank Director Hesolios for the acknowledgement of the progress we've made on turnaround times.
Thank you for that. Thank you for the response, and we appreciate that point. And I stand corrected. It's not just the terms of use. It's terms of use and community guidelines, which are two different things. But in general, these are the two pillars on which you would base that one part of the parallel operation in screening, and then the other, misinformation, would be more specific, if I understand it correctly. So in relation to that, if we're talking about response times, and going back to the question of the representative process, I believe, so is there a pre-posting screening mechanism? Because, for example, what we've learned from ByteDance is that when you post a video, there's like this buffering, which isn't actually required to post their videos. But during that time, they're already screening it amongst, like you said, it's probably a digital bank of other prohibited content before it gets posted. So is that the same with Meta?
Mr. Chairman, if I may. Yes, we proactively screen content. Every piece of content that's posted on our platforms is going to go through some type of automated screening. Yeah. every piece of content will go through some type of automated screening. It does not mean that our screening is perfect, and I do want to emphasize that, right? And as I kind of pointed out previously, our accuracy rates on really clear violations are very high. If we look at our proactive removal rate on, again, issues like terrorism, child exploitative imagery, we're talking above 99%, approaching 99.9%, right? When we get down to other issues that are more nuanced, that are more contextual, that are borderline, then those proactive systems, they may flag it for a human to review, right, as a next step, because it's just kind of too difficult for a machine to make that determination, right? So the review process is complex, but it involves like many different layers. The first one very much would be an automated one as a proactive measure.
Thank you for that response. So generally, the automated pre-posting screening would be very effective for those that are obviously wrong, like you have hate speech, child pornography, terrorism, and the likes. And when it comes to the nuanced parts that we have difficulty, right, which would include the point of this committee hearing, the fake news and misinformation. We understand it to be pretty difficult, and that's where, if I understand correctly, that's where the fact checkers come in. In addition to that, we came across a piece of news that Meta was actually dropping fact checkers in favor of something, I think it was community notes mechanism. Is that correct, or is that not being rolled out globally?
Mr. Chairman, so just one thing I want to point out. In the list of violations, you mentioned hate speech. Hate speech sometimes can be obvious, but other times it cannot. And so that one's a little more nuanced than terrorism, for example, right? Okay, yes, turning to our global fact-checking program. As of, I believe, yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, in the United States only, we have moved to a system of community notes as opposed to our third-party fact-checking system. But everywhere else in the globe, the third-party fact-checking system is the system we still use.
Could you please enlighten us as to why the United States has dropped that fact-checking mechanism? Were there difficulties on their previous review system, and do you foresee that this difficulty would actually be the same all around the globe?
Mr. Chairman, if I may. Congressman, the fact-checking system in the United States, I think what the determination by our global leadership was that we saw that it had become in some way politicized, and that they believed that there was the potential to improve on that system using the community notes system, right? Which companies like X have already developed and implemented for quite some time, which relies on many, many, many more users and many, many more diverse points of view to determine whether content is false in some way. And that system has now been implemented in the United States only. As of now, there's no plan to change that globally, but I think that I would just always say that whether it's our fact-checking system, whether it's our generative AI products, whether it's the user experience in some way, we're always looking to improve everything we do. We're always looking at innovation. And so, the community notes that are now rolling out in the United States, we're obviously going to be looking at, are they effective? Do they make sense? And testing like the capabilities there. But as of now, and there's no plan to change the system other than in the United States.
I still have quite a few, I have a lot of questions actually, but I understand that there's a time constraint for our resource person, so I'll just stick to one or two questions to conclude. Just based on that point, I'll leave the others out. So when they drop the fact-checking, I know it doesn't apply it here, but we'd like to know the possibility of, if that were to be implemented here, we'd want to know what we're working with for our legal framework, right? What laws that we might come out with in relation to that. So if you are dropping fact-checkers and it's community-based, this would now be more in line with the reporting system that you already have. So it's going to be user